My fiancée asked for a break to reconnect with her ex, so I vanished, and what she found when she came back flipped her world upside down. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. We met at my best friend's rooftop party, the skyline glowing as she laughed about hating small talk. We clicked instantly. Late night walks, music swaps, future plans. I was hooked. When she kept in touch with Dylan as friends, I ignored the unease. She said I was overthinking. I trusted her. That trust became my blind spot. Looking back, every text she giggled I held a hint I refused to see. Tessa moved in fast, talked about wedding venues before unpacking boxes. I was flattered, caught in a rush. She'd mentioned Dylan like a joke, calling him a mess with a smirk, but she always responded to his texts. One night, I found her staring at an old photo of them. She said she was deleting it. I believed her. The next morning, her phone buzzed with his name again. I told myself it was harmless history. She began coming home late, blaming traffic, claiming back-to-back meetings. Her perfume smelled different. I asked once. Casually, she laughed, said I was being weird. I let it slide. Then she forgot our dinner plans for my birthday, claimed she was drained. No raised an eyebrow when I told him. Drained from what? He asked. I shrugged. Love meant trust, right? But each excuse chipped away at something. And her smile less frequent, more polite, felt rehearsed. Tessa started locking her phone, new passcode. Always face down. She said it was for work, but she flinched when I walked past. I brushed it off again, then she skipped my work event, claiming a migraine. Yet posted stories at a bar with Sarah. It was last minute, she said. Jake noticed my expression and asked, "You okay?" I lied. Just tired, but I wasn't. I was unraveling one skipped moment at a time. She asked if we could slow down wedding planning, said we were rushing. Yet 2 days later, she gushed about someone else's engagement ring on Instagram. Mixed signals became the norm. She forgot appointments, skipped florist meetings, avoided real conversations. I tried harder, bought her favorite pastries, left notes. Each time, she smiled distractedly and went back to texting. Denise, my mom, gently asked, "Is she happy?" I lied again. She's just overwhelmed. But I wasn't sure anymore. I noticed she'd stopped wearing the engagement ring, said it was getting resized, yet never took it in. Her friends stopped inviting me to group hangs. Sarah once slipped, "Oh, you weren't supposed to know about Friday." I laughed it off, but inside, a knot tightened. Tessa reassured me, just girl stuff. But she was slipping away, and I was clinging to someone already halfway gone. Was I the fool or just the fallback? She came home one night, eyes glossy, voice too soft. "I need a break," she whispered. My stomach dropped from us. She nodded, said she needed clarity about Dylan. My breath caught, but I stayed calm. "Then take it," I said. She blinked surprised. I didn't fight, didn't beg. I just nodded, like she was a coworker asking for time off. That night, I changed every password, called off vendors, and poured a glass of whiskey. Tessa packed a duffel and left like she's return next week. "I'll call you," she said, kissing my cheek. I didn't flinch. As soon as the door closed, I listed the house. Jake helped me clear the garage. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded. Her side of the closet empty, her name on our bank account removed. I left no notes. No dramatics, just silence, and in that silence, I felt the first breath of freedom. Sarah messaged me a week later, "She's back with Dylan. Thought you should know." It didn't sting. I'd already guessed. I replied, "Thanks." Denise brought over lasagna and didn't ask questions. I played music loud and steady, while boxing her keepsakes. Her laugh echoed in old voicemails, but I didn't listen long. Each item tossed felt like a confession undone. Day 5. I stopped waiting for her text. I stopped checking her socials. I stopped explaining myself. One of Dylan's friends DM'd me, "She's playing both sides." I didn't reply. Instead, I sold the furniture she picked, repainted the bedroom, donated the throw pillow she obsessed over. I shredded the wedding binder. That night, I sat in the cleared-out living room, sipping coffee, heart beating quiet. No rage, no tears, just release. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I wasn't the standby. I was the exit sign she never saw coming. Tessa texted 2 weeks later, "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. She called. I let it ring. Then she showed up, key in hand, only to find it didn't fit. The locks were changed. She knocked, then pounded. I stayed still. She looked through the window, saw boxes, for sale sign. No trace of her. She stepped back, eyes wide. I watched from behind the curtain. Calm. That was the moment she knew this wasn't her story anymore. Sarah called. Tessa had told people I cheated, that I kicked her out without warning. I laughed, let her spin. But then Jake's boss asked me if I needed her support. She was spreading it at my workplace. So I posted screenshots, her messages asking for space, confirming Dylan, no captions, just facts, and the silence afterward, deafening. She lost the room, not with drama but with her own words turned back on her. Tessa emailed my mom, trying to clarify things. Denise replied with a single sentence, "Your things are on my porch." That weekend, I dropped off Tessa's boxes labeled and taped, no note, just closure and cardboard. Neighbors watched. She wasn't home. Later, I got a message that was cold. I didn't reply. That's the thing about heat, you feel it when it's burning, but ice, it just stays quiet, final, unmistakable. She tried one last trick, crying to Sarah, claiming she'd been confused, that Dylan pressured her. Sarah, once neutral, forwarded the voicemail to me. "Do what you need," she said. I saved it, didn't share. Power wasn't exposure anymore, power was silence. When Tessa realized I wasn't reacting, not online or off, she panicked. I'd become untouchable, not because I fought, but because I stopped playing. She wanted a game. I walked away from the board. Jake invited me to a group dinner. Tessa showed up with Dylan. The table tense. I nodded politely, made small talk, stayed unfazed. When Dylan got drunk and snide, I stood, smiled, and left. No scene, no insult, just exit. Later, I heard he accused her of still loving Liam. She denied it. But that night cracked their illusion. She wanted me jealous. Instead, I gave her indifference, and that stung more than any comeback ever could. Weeks later, I bumped into Dylan at a coffee shop. He looked drained. "You win," he muttered. I didn't respond. He added, "She still brings you up." I sipped my drink. "That's her burden." He nodded, defeated. I left without looking back. Tessa hadn't chosen either of us. She chased safety and lost both. It wasn't a love triangle. It was a rerun she kept replaying. But this time, I'd changed the channel permanently. Her friends started messaging me. "She's spiraling. She talks about you constantly." I didn't answer. I wasn't a therapist. I wasn't her closure. I was her consequence. Noah joked. "She's haunted." I smirked as she haunted herself. I never made a scene, never threw shade. I just rebuilt, quietly. And somehow, that quiet screamed louder than any public meltdown. She wanted fireworks. I gave her silence, and that echo never stopped bouncing back at her. Tessa tried to be friends, texted memes, inside jokes, old photos. I blocked her. Then she emailed a playlist our songs. I deleted it. That wasn't nostalgia, it was bait. Denise called it out. She's rewriting the ending, but I already closed the book. She missed the part where I stopped needing her. And when you stop needing someone, their tricks lose magic. She wasn't a spell anymore, just static, and I'd changed the frequency for good. Sarah told me Tessa showed up crying at her place, said she wanted her old life back. Sarah asked, which part, the lies or the safety net? That silence was the answer. I didn't celebrate. I didn't mock. I just felt a strange stillness, like walking out after a storm. The damage wasn't mine to fix, and in that moment I realized sometimes peace isn't about healing them, it's about not letting them back in. Jake forwarded a group chat screenshot, Tessa asking mutuals to stage a run-in, said it would be cathartic. I laughed, or maybe sighed. That's what I'd become, a healing checkpoint in her redemption tour. But I wasn't part of her script anymore. I declined the next hangout. Changed my gym, switched cafes, not out of fear but choice. She chased collisions, I chose detours, and in doing so, I proved something. Closure doesn't need confrontation, just direction. Tessa emailed a long message, no subject, just emotion. She said she missed us. That she didn't know better. I didn't open it fully, just previewed the first line and then archived it, not to avoid pain but because I'd outgrown it. Denise smiled when I told her. Proud of you, she said. That night I sat on my balcony, mine in hand, stars out. She wanted a reset. I chose a new system entirely. No showed me a TikTok, Tessa lips listening to sad breakup audio. She's really on her arc, he joked. I didn't watch twice. She wasn't telling the truth, she was telling a story. A curated heartbreak, but real grief doesn't need filters. I muted her name, muted the mentions, and slowly, she faded from my feed, from my thoughts. Grief ended when I stopped feeding it. She turned love into theater. I left the stage for good. Jake's girlfriend saw Tessa crying in a bookstore, holding a copy of our favorite novel. She looked at hollow, she said. I remembered reading that book aloud during storms, but I didn't ache, I just remembered. Memories aren't anchors, they're markers. And mine pointed forward. I bought a new copy, read it to myself on a rainy night, alone and unshaken. She clung to the past. I rewrote mine quietly, page by reclaimed page. Tessa sent a gift, an old hoodie of mine, washed and folded, no note, just a silent olive branch. I donated it. Love isn't a keepsake, it's a choice, and I'd chosen distance. Sarah asked. You sure? I nodded. It's just fabric now. She tried to tether me with memories, but my roots had moved somewhere new, somewhere hers couldn't reach. She thought reminders would reopen doors. I'd built new ones with locks she didn't design. Her Instagram turned philosophical quotes about growth. Lessons, letting go. It reeked of performance. Real healing isn't aesthetic, it's invisible. Jake texted. She's rebranding. I shrugged. Let her. I wasn't part of her campaign. While she posted, I lived. New hobbies, new spaces, new people who knew me without her show. She needed validation. I needed nothing. When you stop chasing attention, he shows up unannounced and never asks you to explain yourself. A mutual friend said, she thinks you're still angry. I smiled. Tell her I'm indifferent, because that's the truth. She confused silence with grudge, but my quiet wasn't spite, it was peace. I didn't forgive her to free her. I forgave to move on. She waited for a message, a fight, a sign, none came. Some stories don't get final chapters, some just stop being and mine. I shelved hers long ago. Denise ran into Tessa at the grocery store. She asked how I was. My mom replied, thriving, no malice, just truth. Tessa blinked, nodded, walked away. Denise called me later, voice warm. I think she finally knows. I didn't need her to. But something settled in me, soft and final. Closure doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it's a quiet nod from someone who once broke you, finally seeing you healed, unshaken, and out of reach. At a friend's wedding, I saw her again alone. She looked at me across the room, eyes soft. Smile faint, I nodded once, kept walking. She didn't follow. That was our final scene. No words, no tears, just distance honored. No raised his glass to clean breaks, he whispered. I clinked it back, not bitter, not boastful, just done. The past doesn't haunt when you leave no door for it to knock on. Jake found an old photo of us, me and Tessa, laughing on a beach trip. Wanted, he asked. I looked once, smiled, and said, no thanks. Not because it hurt but because it didn't. That chapter was closed, burned and no framed, never, just filed away in memory. Untouched growth isn't loud, it's subtle, it's choosing today without dragging yesterday behind. I didn't need souvenirs, I had peace, and peace doesn't come in picture frames. I used to believe closure needed conversation, a final word, a clean break, but peace came when I stopped looking for it in her voice. I found it in mine, in the quiet routines, the solo wins, the rebuilt life. I didn't heal to impress, I healed to exist without flinching. She became a lesson I stopped repeating, and in that stillness, I became someone I actually respected. Finally, truly. Me, I started journaling not about her, but about mornings, meals, laughs that felt whole. At first, her name slipped in and then less than not at all. Healing wasn't a straight line, it zigzagged through doubt, clarity, and deep quiet. But every entry without her was a win. Every untouched memory, a reclaim. I didn't just move on, I grew out into spaces she never touched, and Calden shrank spaces entirely mine. People asked if I'd ever forgive her. I said, I already did, not for her so I could stop carrying it. Forgiveness wasn't permission. It was release. I stopped expecting apologies, stopped rehearsing confrontations. I smiled easier, slept deeper, and the scar I didn't vanish, it just stopped bleeding. Tessa remained a page, but I was no longer stuck on it. I'd started the next chapter when she wouldn't write. Now, I live in a small place with quiet mornings and no half-kept promises. Tessa's name never echoes here. I'd plant herbs on the windowsill, cook for one, laugh without wondering if someone's watching. The ghost of what we were, gone and not exorcised, just expired. Some stories don't explode, they expire, and mine, it ended in peace. I stopped checking her socials, stopped replaying old conversations. I built something new, routine, honest, mine. My friends didn't ask about her anymore. They asked about my weekend plans. My favorite books. Tessa became background noise in a life now led with intention. And the best part, I didn't need her back. I never did. I just forgot that for a while. Closure wasn't a conversation. It was a choice. To live louder than the silence she left. To fill my own gaps. To become my own anchor. I don't miss her. I miss the illusion I clung to. But illusions fade, and what's left? Reality, whole steady mine. The ending wasn't loud, just final. And that's the closure no apology could ever give. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.